Well, this is Reichle here. I just spent 30 minutes talking to a camera that wasn't turned on. So I have to rehash this whole thing. Basically, I'm in the process of refurbishing my Mark II Fender Rhodes. It's not a Fender Rhodes, it's a Rhodes. After Rhodes and Fender split up, it's a Mark II stage piano, vintage 1981. My dad bought for me whenever I graduated from high school, that I used to gig on. I made quite a bit of money from it, but it being 30 years old, 81, 91, 2001, 31 years old, was not in very good shape, and I got a bug up my butt to refurbish it. I say that word, refurbish. But anyway, the new Rhodes is like about $5 grand. So I got an idea to basically pull out any vintage gear that I've got and try to get it back up and running with some tender, loving care. So this Mark II was one of the projects. The other one was our Hammond A100 organ that I recapped the tone generator, but I won't get into that. So anyway, this instrument, whenever I pulled it out, it actually worked, but it had at least 15 bad notes. That means bad pickups, and I wasn't sure why these white pickups, die, but they do. A lot of people on the internet say they're very prone to failure, the white pickups of the Mark II. But anyway, that was the biggest concern. I also have a Rhodes 64 key piano. It belonged to my dad, so I pulled it out, and it didn't put out any sound either. So I had them both set up side by side out here in the garage, and went through a lengthy process of fixing them both up. The first issue at hand, after reading vintage vibe tutorials on YouTube and other miscellaneous information on the internet, was that I needed to clean it up. So basically the tone bars and the tines were all corroded, badly corroded. So the tone bars weren't so bad, but the tine underneath it, they all had nasty corrosion on the posts. So I figured that that needed to be gone if the instrument is going to maintain for another 30 years. So that was the timeliest thing. I have the jig that I built. I don't know what I did with it. But a long piece of wood that had to have pairs of nails, so that as you take each one of these tine tone bar assemblies off, you take the nails out, and then you can set it on the jig so that you can set them up, that you can get to them, but something is holding them in place and also keeping the springs in the proper place, because they didn't have replacement springs available at the time that I did this. So I have a very elaborate jig, which you can see on my other videos. But anyway, it took a lot of time to take the post off by taking out this hex head screw, putting the post in the vise, and then cleaning that with a wire brush on all four sides. It took a long time to do all 73 keys, but I cleaned the corrosion off of those. I cleaned the tone bars, which are nice and clean. This is just a very simple zinc coating that they put to keep them from corroding. There is no plating. It's just a little bit of zinc coating, and they've done well. I have a little bit of corrosion here, but for the most part they're in good shape. Cleaned those, put them back together, replaced all the screws, washers, and grommets from a kit from Vintage Vibe, and then put all these tines back on again, and they're in good shape now. Then I replaced the 15 bad pickups, which were just miscellaneously spaced on the harp. No rhyme or reason there. What I did originally was a bad thing. I stole the 15 top pickups off the 64 key, because I didn't have any replacement pickups then, to use those to fix these. Knowing in due time I would find a way to get new pickups, which I did. I found a guy, Nathan Smith in Plano, Texas, that if you send your bad pickup assembly to him, he'll rewind it and send it back to you for a very nominal amount of money. So that's what I did. I have a box here of freshly wound pickups. So these, I don't know, because I've got all the notes in the 73 and all the notes in the 64, I don't know where these came from. I mean, somehow I bought some pickups off of eBay that weren't rewound. That was the original way that I started, but they're expensive. So anyway, I sent him about 20. and when they come back they look like this. He uses a red bobbin with a clear cover, and it doesn't have white. But anyway, I got about 15 of these new ones where they've been rewound and they're all good. So anytime you got a bad note that goes out on the piano, you're backed up. So this is cool. Nathan Smith. So finally, the last note that was bad when I came back from my ship was third space C. So when I replaced that pickup, because my soldering technique was not so good, I knocked out the B and the C sharp on either side of the C, because you can't put too much heat on those old pickups or they'll quit on you. Why that happens, I don't know, but you need to use a really hot soldering iron. Let it warm up so it gets really hot. You use your wire, connect it, the posts on the pickups, the harness, and then you just touch just really quickly, just enough to melt the solder, but it doesn't get heat, transfer heat to the pickup, or it'll knock them out. So I learned that lesson the hard way. The less heat, the better. But the whole point of this is that this got me into the voicing process, voicing and tuning. So when I cleaned those tines, I oiled the tuning springs because they were rusted so that you could move them. And as a result of that, the piano went out of tune because I moved all the springs, but it was also a little pedagogy to force me to tune the piano, which I don't like to do, but I had to do it. So I'm going to give you a little trick on that. Whenever you tune the Rhodes, absolutely what you don't do is tune it with the harp down, with that little specialty screwdriver that's bent over with a notch, and you can move the spring. Forget it. When they did this at the factory, lift the harp up like this, reach underneath here, grab the tine with your fingernail and hit it. Plug that into a tuner, pluck that tine with your finger, and then use your fingers right underneath it to move that spring. It's almost virtually impossible to try to do it from the top with a screwdriver. So you lift it up. I used both hands. I grab that individual tine with both fingertips, and then I grab that spring, and you slide that back and forth. That's by far the quickest and easiest way to tune the Rhodes, not with the harp down. So anyway, I got it close to being in tune. The big issue now, which is what I've been dealing with the last week or so, is how to voice it. Which basically is how do you adjust the tine to get the proper sound and the proper volume. And when I went into it, I wasn't sure. I knew that you could get a variety of different timbral variations of a Rhodes tine tone bar assembly, but I couldn't really remember what they were. When I originally voiced this, I went through it. I basically didn't put enough of the fundamental note in each pitch. So I don't know why I didn't like that the fundamental is the bass, the bottom fundamental note. So I had way more overtones, and I didn't have the fundamental, and as a result of that, I had a nasty high-pitched sine wave in each one that was unpleasant. So I had to get on the internet on my laptop, which I haven't been able to do in the last week or so because our wireless is down, and get on the Vintage Vibe website and look at some of their YouTube videos that basically tell you and you know, give you an idea of what you're supposed to do. So voicing it is there's certain options that you can choose. The bottom line is you're just taking the tine and you're trying to center it as close to the pickup as you can so that you get the greatest amount of volume. If you go up a little bit like this, it knocks the harmonics off and you get mostly fundamental, they say, and then when you come down here right in front of the pickup, it picks up some of the other harmonics too. So I basically went back this morning and put the fundamental back in the notes, and the bark of the Mark I appeared. And I don't think that this Mark II from the factory had that much bark. I think it was voiced a different way, and a lot of people like the sound of the Mark I because it has this deeper kind of roar. I think it's whatever instrument it is. It's all how you turn these screws. So basically, you screw these down enough to where you get the pickup to where it comes down and sits right in front of the tine, in front of the magnet, and then you adjust the back screw to add fundamental or the upper harmonic. I'm not going to do it because I have them all set and I don't want to fuck it up again. But anyway, I got pretty close with This is escapement. Here again. I haven't done the top octave. This sounds real strong to me C's are out of tune. I think it sounds good. I think it sounds clean and even. So I'm probably has more sustain than it did before because of these new grommets that give you a huge amount of sustain. Then the magic nice effect, which is completely unrelated to the Rhodes, but I'll give you the story too. I have 5 Leslie 60 speakers, 2 complete sets of Leslie 60 tone cabinets, which were built to compete with the original Fender Rhodes set of satellite speakers that Rhodes made. Leslie came in like he did with the Hammond Organ Company and said, I'm going to put out a better product than you do. He never made a musical instrument, but his amplification was by far better than either Fender Rhodes or the Hammond Company, and was largely responsible for making those instruments popular. So a lot of indebtedness to Don Leslie. But anyway, I have 2 sets of Leslie 60 tone cabinets, which are basically 2, a pair, an amp in one and just a satellite speaker in the other, in faux stereo with 2 10-inch speakers that are, I think they're 16 ohms. But the beauty of them is that they have a space generator built in also to compete with the suitcase model Fender Rhodes Tremolo. That particular unit, I think, had 12-inch speakers in the front and in the back, 2 facing you and 2 facing out, but it had a stereo tremolo between the 2 speakers. Well, this was built to compete, but in my opinion the stereo effect is much more beautiful. As you can hear, and it is created by a space generator, which actually has a real motor, like a Leslie Hammond organ speaker. It has a real motor that spins a rotary capacitor, and that creates a phase shift, which gives you this faux stereo, which is very noticeable. Here it's flat, but I've just loved that sound, and for me that's just been the cat's eye of amplification for the Fender Rhodes. But anyway, so I had a set of these was a long story. I bought the original set back in the 80s because I needed an amp for this piano. I think I bought them from a piano tuner here, Jack Wright in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And a few years later, one of them got stolen from our station wagon here in the driveway, but they stole the main cabinet, but they didn't steal the preamp, and they didn't steal the satellite cabinet. So it was completely useless to whomever it was that broke in and stole that cabinet. But I kept this preamp all those years. 31 years later, I still have it. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and at that time, basically it was 1985, the school also owned a Fender Rhodes and a pair of those Leslie 60 cabinets where, and again, someone had lost the preamp, which is common, I find out now, that it's common to find these cabinets, but not common to find the proper preamp to be able to use them. So Vic Lipscomb, whose band I played in for 4 years, the Fabulous Dance Band, built a preamp into the Rhodes and interfaced the Leslies directly to the Rhodes at UNC Chapel Hill, and it worked. But for some reason we didn't use it very much. There was a little distortion in one of the cabinets. Professor Jim Ketch decided to get rid of those, so he turned it all over to surplus. And a Baptist church in Orange County came and bought that set of Leslie 60s and a Rhodes for a ridiculous price of like $100 or something, so that they could use it to warm the choir up. I found out through surplus at UNC with a little bit of investigative reporting. They finally gave me the name of who it was that bought them, and I called this guy up on the phone and I said, I really want those cabinets, can we work something out? And he said, as long as you buy me something that we can use to play the piano through, you can have them. So with a good friend of mine, John Freeman, and a Leslie schematic in hand, we drove to Hillsboro, or Chapel Hill. It was near Chapel Hill somewhere, Orange Creek or Orange County Baptist Church. I went in there and I cut the preamp out of the Rhodes and put it back to stock so that you could use it with a regular amp, and brought, I think I paid him maybe $125, and then brought the cabinets home. And it turns out the one that had distortion had just a little bit of a bent frame on the speaker. But I brought them home, and obviously with my preamp, they did work. I had some problems with an intermittent in one of those, so that they would cut in and out, so I didn't feel 100% confident of using those on a gig, although I did here and there. But for the most part, since then they've just sat in storage, and I went to bought a DX7 II back when I went to University of South Carolina, because I lived upstairs and I couldn't haul this Rhodes up the steps of the apartment. So anyway, those Leslie 60s have sat in storage for a long, long time. Although I think, that when I pull them out, they usually do work. Anyway, on eBay, about 7 months ago, a very good pair of Leslie 60s showed up in a listing in Colorado, and they looked almost new. And she said that they did come with a preamp and said that they worked, but I was a little suspect about that. But I knew, because I have a preamp, that either way, if they worked, I would be able to use them. So I gambled and I bought them. I made a best offer price of just about $425, including shipping, for these very heavy cabinets. It was a good deal. Sure enough, they showed up here, and this was the preamp that was included with those Leslie 60s from Colorado. I plugged it in, and they worked a little bit, but it was obvious that this was indeed, as I thought, the improper preamp. But my gamble paid off, because as you can see, I have two here. So I tried them with the original preamp that I've kept all these years, for 31 years, and they worked fine. And then, make a long story short, the preamp that I cut out of that Rhodes at that Orange County Baptist Church, I came home and I said, well, here I have the preamp, and these are rare, and you find these cabinets and no one can use them, so why don't I build my own preamp? So I did that. I took that circuit board that Vic built, and I went to Radio Shack and I bought me a box and the proper pots with the proper specs and the switch, and wired it all together, and I built my own preamp, and it works. So that means I have two operating preamps for these Leslie 60 cabinets. So what I was hoping is, because I got two sets, I would have both sets up and running well. The older set, when I tried them, when I came home this time, the main amplifier cabinet is not working for some reason. The speaker works, but the cabinet doesn't. But even in that case, I have a new, almost new set that works well with the preamp, and I'm very happy about that. So the combination of this Rhodes that I'm refurbishing, which has this great sound, with these Leslie speakers, makes me very happy. So eventually I will troubleshoot this other amp that's not working. Maybe I can get that back up once I retrieve the repair manual, which I have in the schematic for my storage cubicle. Or better yet, that I have a spare set of parts. I have another space generator, so if something happens in these newer cabinets, I've got parts there that I can take care of them. But all in all, it's a success story for this Fender Rhodes and these Leslie speakers. Much better on the previous video where the camera didn't have the button pushed, because I was singing Have You Met Miss Jones, which I'm not now. It bothers me that this shit is in the way of the keys.